ahead and start talking, because when we're done talking, we can get you guys out of here. All right, so I went through, and there's probably a little bit more that I need to catch up on from people that have turned things back in or turned in things at a different time frame or whatever. But for the most part within the class, I know that I have position statement from a couple of people to catch up on, and then your potential articles. The articles are just to make sure that you are starting to look now, and that you are kind of within the realm of where they need to be. I am not going and pulling every single article. I'm looking at what you're doing as a whole. I still have to get through some of those yet, but other than that, I should be at least kind of caught up on things. If you have comments or questions, I prefer to think of grading and all of that as a conversation between us. So sometimes I'm just going to give you your points for turning something in. Like, it's a place marker. Like, your 5 articles, at this point in time, I know you're going to have more than 5 articles, so I'm not going to be like, you didn't hit the parameters. I'm telling you now, after you turn them in, that if you didn't hit all the parameters for it, they're really not a qualitative article. I'm going to comment on it, but it's going to be, I'm not looking up every single one and reading it to make sure that it fits the parameters of this, because that would take me days, not just a few hours, days to like pull every single one of them, read them all. You guys are more the subject experts in your areas. I am going to be your kind of coaching you through, I guess is a better way to think of it, or kind of like your personal trainer to whip you into qualitative shape, in that I don't have to know your every single in and out of the research that you have. If I feel like it doesn't fit, I had somebody one time that was taking, they had articles that were actually like mixed method studies, which I'm fine with mixed methods because it has a piece of each, but they were taking the survey work and really applying it to their qualitative stuff, and they didn't really see the disconnect there. We had to have a little bit of a sit down and a talk about that, because they really were trying to take quantitative methods and embed them within their qualitative study, which works fine for mixed methods, but we're not mixed methoding it this fall. I guess it's fall, not summer. So with that, I'll kind of pull you back on it. But the articles as a whole, I just want you to be started. And I know I'm really terrible with, if I don't have somebody else's deadline, it's probably going to take me a long time. So this is just to kind of push you towards getting started and getting your things worked on in ways that are productive for you. The same thing with, I used to have you throw a draft of your lit review into the assignment box, like this week, at the end of this week. It's going to be really, really not formulated, and it's going to be subject to some change as you move on and kind of finalize things. So if you want to throw it in there, so I take a skim down through it and see if it's going to need, like, this is really short, this doesn't address any things you're talking about in your topic, I can do that. I am not going to grade it. I'm not going to look at it and say, like, you need to have 3 more paragraphs addressing this, or you didn't, this issue is totally missing out of your piece, because this is a draft. So if you want to shoot me an email with it and I'll take a look down through it, at this point in time, it's fine. But keep in mind, it's more of a check mark that, yes, you are making progress. And if it helps you to have to send me something at the end of the week, then you are welcome to send me something at the end of the week. I'll even be mean and say, send me, email me and say, I need to tell you that you need to do it, if that helps motivate you to get going. But all I want is to see that you're making some progress towards having a lit review put together, okay? So that's my goal with that. There's not even an assignment placed in the class for it anymore. I think I took it out. It's supposed to take it out anyway. So if you do want me to do that for you, just shoot me an email, and I'll email back at the end of the week and say, turn me in what you have. This last week, you were supposed to be coming up with some ideas for your topic and starting to research your lit review, finding your articles, starting to write on the lit review, that kind of thing. Do you have any questions that go along with that, you ran into problems, you're having questions about what a lit review looks like, anything like that?
do you want us to write an introduction as well, or is that something for later?
You can do your introduction later. Don't write an abstract right now, for sure. Abstract's
Right.
the best thing you write. The introduction, if it leads into your lit review and helps explain it and you want to write it now, that's fine.
Okay.
I tend to write it, I tend to cobble it together a little bit at the beginning and just kind of chunk some things in there that I want to say. And then I smooth it out at the end for me, but it's however, if you feel comfortable doing it. Your lit review as a whole tends to look like a funnel, okay? What you want to do with your lit review is not tell me everything about everything. This is not a book report. The targeted lit review is going to try and make a theoretical statement or position statement for you that says, this study really needs to be done because we're missing some pieces in the literature. So you'll start out with this big, wide topic, you know, oh, educational technology as a whole. Or, you know, Sir Ken Robinson says creativity is missing in K-12 education. Okay, so here's this big, broad topic. So here's creativity in education, and it's missing. And so some studies have been done on creativity that look at how adults define creativity. And there's a whole pile of those ways that adults find creativity is defined for adults. We measure creativity in adults. See how it's going in? We measure creativity in adults in these ways. We have little surveys that we take, that we self-report, and we have very few ways that we look at products to determine if they're creative or not. For kids, we have very, very few ways of measuring creativity, and it's even less defined. So therefore, because creativity is missing from schools, we need to have a way to look at artifacts that kids do in school as a result of ill-structured problems or open-ended questions or divergent assignments or whatever. We need to have a way to be able to foster creativity in school and then measure it. There's my study. There's the gap in the research. That's the hole that I'm heading for. This is really a study I'm working on. So I just assigned kids today like stuff to code for me. So, you know, you're getting like real in time. This is what I'm trying to do right now. So in context, a friend of mine who works at Idaho and I designed this at the end of the school year. We designed a unit to take into 4th and 5th grade classrooms where we had the students look at biomes and environments and talk about bugs and spiders and how they, what kind of parts that they have, how creatures exist in these environments, how adaptation occurs, all in one day, of course, how adaptation occurs, and then how does genetic adaptation work? So then we looked at like heredity, genetic traits, how they pass, you know, that your genes come half from your parent, each parent, and then looking at Punnett squares to be able to predict traits that things are going to have. And then we said, you know, so you have this biome, build a bug that lives in this biome. How's it going to walk around? How is it going to eat? How's it going to protect itself? And how is it going to, how's it going to eat? How's it going to move? How is it going to protect itself? And one more thing that I can't think of right this second. And we created this little kind of like just kind of squares on a sheet. That was our scaffolding that had them some ideas to think about. And then we said it can be a real bug. It can be a bug that comes from something that you make up. It could come from Minecraft. It could come from Pokemon. It could come from a movie. It could be really in the desert or in one of these other biomes that we have that exist on Earth that we already explored. And then we said, or you can make it up. Anything you can imagine, okay? You can do that. And then you had to identify, like, how is it eating? How's it going to protect itself? How's it going to navigate? And kind of think about how that fits in the biome you picked. Then we gave them 3D pens, which are like 3D printers that you handhold, and you can draw with them or whatever. Showed them how to use them, and let them go for about an hour and 15 minutes to do a bug. And then we talked about, you know, Adam's bug and my bug have bug babies. What do they look like? Well, genetics tells us. So we identified some things positive and negative, and then they did Punnett squares and predicted that. This is 4th and 5th grade. It worked pretty well in most classes. But now we need to identify what the creative processes are and if students are actually being creative with these. So our literature review looks just like we talked about. And I call it a theoretical framework. Your book, I think, uses the terms interchangeably. Some things call it a conceptual framework. Some things call it a literature review. Some things call it a theoretical framework. In any of these cases, it is basically looking at the research that is aligning with your topic, starting off with a broad topic, narrowing it down, making it make sense. You want to show with your literature review the steps that you're taking to say, here's what we know on a smaller scale, here's what we know, this is why this study needs to be done, because there's this big, huge hole in the gaping hole in the literature that is not being addressed by anything, or very few studies, or by studies in this context but not in this context. So, we have ways of measuring creativity in adults but not in kids. We have ways of measuring creativity of products for adults but not for kids. Very few people have done this, so we've got to do it. Okay, so from that's what our literature review looks like. Then you'll have your study. You'll talk about what you're going to do for your study. Are you interviewing? Are you looking at artifacts? Are you doing this or that? Are you applying a rubric? You're going to tell us how we analyze it. This is for way, way, way in the future, by the way. We're going to apply these codes and look for these kind of things. This is what we're looking at here. We're applying a rubric. We're getting a score. We're going to, open-endedly being assessing different pieces of this. And then you talk about what you had. And towards the end of your paper, whenever you get to this, you'll be talking about, these are the things that I found. The students' creativity varied. That experience with the pens prior to it mattered with the skill, but it didn't matter with the actual creative elements that they put into it. That the use of the scaffold or the rubric or the scaffold that we had, the paper that we had no impact on their creativity whatsoever. These are the findings that we had, and then I would support them, and I'll say, according to Ron, a 5th grade student who drew this kind of bug, blah, 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 his bug looked like this, I'm going to describe it like this. And, he had no experience with the pen, but was able to draw in 3-dimensional things, and he didn't even write anything on a scaffold, so it didn't really help. So these are the kind of ways that we can pull the pieces together to provide evidence of what we are saying is happening, but we don't have a P-test to do this, which you do in Ming's class, which is last semester, in the quantitative stuff. The P-test is like yes or no, okay? I kind of think of it like you're coming home whenever you're in high school and you're sneaking into the house and your dad's sitting in the chair in the living room and he flips the light on when you walk in, okay? He has the clock there. There's a yes or no. That's your quantitative study. It's telling you, yes, you were, significantly, statistically significant or not. It's telling you you're late or not. You providing all the evidence of why you should be late is kind of like your qualitative study. Well, here are the reasons I was late, Dad. My car had a flat tire. You can go out and look. I'm running on the spare. We had to stop along the road and do this, this, and this. Or, this happened and I lost my watch and now I don't know what time it was. So here's my other piece of evidence. I don't have a watch on my arm. So all these reasons that you're giving for this to support why you were late is kind of along the lines of a qualitative study, when you're going to be supplying pieces of evidence that you have captured in different ways to support the statement that you're making, because you don't have a value to say yes or no. Okay, so in my eyes, the quantitative study does a yes or a no, and the qualitative study supplies the why and the how and the reasoning behind it and kind of flushes it all out. All right, so this week you're going to be working, any questions? You can include quantitative studies in your literature review, just make sure that they kind of are identified as quantitative, and hopefully you'll find a couple qualitative ones to go along with it. I know some of you in the pieces that you're investigating, it's going to be hard to find qualitative pieces. So we may have to back you out a little bit and look at a little broader topic, or we may have to focus on 1 or 2 studies that are qualitative to pull those pieces in and then base all the rest of it on all this work quantitatively has been done. Maybe we need to start looking at qualitative reasoning or qualitative means to go along with this. More questions? Okie dokie. All right, so I'm going to share my screen with you. I think this is the right paper. If it's not, you'll be seeing a rubric. There we go. Okay, so this is a paper that is in your, and I filled this out today as we were working through it with me and my undergraduate students that are researching with me, since I have no graduate students on campus. really that are going with me to schools and pulling data and that kind of thing. So the topic for us is looking at like kind of fostering creativity in youth. This can be really brief. It does not have to be a huge paragraph. It can be just a couple words for the topic. I don't care what kind of research you have right now. It can be quantitative, qualitative. This is a really, really short one. You can put 2 or 3 paragraphs in there if it helps you out to kind of think through how these all fit together. But I just want a little summary of what you know about your topic to start with and kind of how it's helping frame your thinking. Here's the gaps. Okay, so for me, there's not a common definition. It's very context specific. There's not really measures for youth. There's not really, even for adults, ways to measure creativity in products. So we're going to take an adult measure for it and target it towards it, measure creativity with this new rubric. And then we're going to also be looking at some of the other pieces of literature. But I was working with some students this afternoon, so that's what we said. Your problem, question, statement, or research goal is basically what are you going to do that's going to address the gap up here? Okay, so see, I'm trying to scaffold you through thinking through what your research questions are actually going to be and how they're going to be structured in a very theoretically framed kind of way. So because you're going from the literature that you have, the gap that you want to address, what you want to look at. And it could be as simple as studies have been done in this context. I want to do this in my context because I think it's really important. And in that case, you may need to pull in literature that doesn't feel like it's related, but that addresses the need for it in your area. So that can happen. Email me if we want to talk about that. And then down here in the chart, which won't stay on the page and I don't know why, if I want to look at how do we foster creativity in youth, or how can we foster creativity in youth kind of is my overarching goal with this, my research questions for this project, these are really specific ones that are focusing on very specific pieces. You know, they can be more general. I could have written instead here how, like my other question could have been, instead of all these very, very specific ones, we could have said like, how do you demonstrate creativity in classroom products? That would have been overarching all of those questions that we have here. From what we were talking about, we would be looking very, very broadly here with this versus very specific with these ones. How do youth demonstrate creativity? We could look at their conversations that they had with their friends. We could look at their video that they created. We could look at the bug itself. We could look at how they identify things that are not. Those kind of things. So we could be looking at all of these things. And just to give you an example of it, from a video camera we had running while they were doing the lesson, we captured some conversation. Observations tend to capture conversation or actions of things that people are doing. So from this conversation, we had one kid that was talking to another, and she said, I really love cotton candy, so I think I'm going to make my bug live on a cotton candy cloud. And it's going to live on, it's going to drink rainbows because they have water in it, and it's going to only eat cotton candy. So I need to make it really, really skinny because it's going to be so fat from all the sugar, okay, and the cotton candy. So that was the conversation she had. When she described the bug, she didn't give any of that backstory really. She just said, you know, this is I don't know, Petunia Cotton Candy Princess. She has little wings here to help her from sticking in the cotton candy clouds, and you know, she has a little sipper for a mouth because she's drinking out of the rainbows, and she had like colored feet, little tiny colored feet, so she didn't stick in the cotton candy when she landed. So she was describing the features that she had in this video to us, but it didn't capture the conversation. So these were two different things that described it from two different angles. Then we looked at the bug itself. You know, it was a princess with a crown. with wings that she said was a bug that had like a long tongue sticking out. So did it have pieces of bugs in it? Yeah, a couple things like the wings and the tongue. Did it have things that were not common to bugs? Yes. Was it three-dimensional and not two-dimensional like she was drawing it with a pencil? Yes. She used more than one color. So these are things that we were using to kind of look at the product and identify if we thought it was creative or not based on the product. So these are ways that I can get data to answer this question. How do they demonstrate creativity? Well, when they're talking to kids, they showed it. We can pull data from the video that they created. We can pull data from the bug itself. So when you're working through these and looking for questions, you want to make sure that there's a way to get the data. So if it says, how do students understand the annotation process? How are you going to find out if they understand it or not? Well, you could talk to them. You could have them write a reflection. You could look at the annotations that they make and see how they're using it. So in that case, understand is maybe not the best terminology there, because understanding it means you have to figure out a way to have the students or the people that are participating make what they're thinking visible. So a lot of the data collection that you happen to do with a qualitative research project, that's going to be a piece of it. How are you going to capture your data? How are you going to find out what they're doing or how they're doing it? What are you going to be able to do to kind of make the case, to prove this to other people that what you're thinking is happening is correct? Okay? And when we have all these different pieces like I have for that question lined up there, we call it triangulating, where we pull across all of these to make our case, because then it makes our case very solid. Whereas if I just said, I took a picture of the bug and I said, well, it's really creative because of this, this, and this, somebody might say they saw that on Fairy Godparents and that's what they drew. But because she's talking about the cotton candy clouds and the feet are so that it can land on the cotton candy and not get stuck, and all these other pieces, we can say, no, it's novel, it's effective for the context that she's given with that framework. This is creativity in its heart because we have these 3 different pieces or 4 different pieces we're pulling from that help, you know, create this thick, rich description that's talking about what the student is really putting forward there as their understanding of the assignment. So, okay, I'm done talking. What kind of things are you thinking about with your projects? Is this making you change what you're thinking about? Are you having questions about how you're going to pull these things together? Because this week, the big assignment that I want from you, the thing I'm looking at, is this paper right here. I want you to be able to theoretically, you know, pull a little bit from your literature review, lay out where you think you have to go with this, and start to craft some research questions. They are not set in stone. Some of you might be great, and you might lay out research questions, and I'm like, yes, go. But a lot of the time, it's a switch in mindset from quantitative to qualitative, and some of your questions may be really too broad to get done in like a 4-week time chunk. So I'll probably play with the questions with you for quite a while, a week or 2, until we really get them solidified. Okay, so don't think they have to be perfect. Don't worry about them being perfect. You're turning me in something that we can work with. Okay, so now, talk to me. What do you think? Is this doable with what you're working on? What kind of things do you need me to do for you to help you out to be able to do this?
What if we don't find any gaps? You make one?
If you don't find any gaps, and you can't find any gaps by switching to a different context, like maybe this has never been done in this kind of school, or maybe this has never been done with this group of teachers or something like that, you may find something that's very beneficial for you for your project that you're working on or the program that you're working in. But to be honest, nobody's going to publish it. They're not going to care one bit that your study found something within your school that has been done a bunch of other times before. So it's disheartening when you send something into a journal and they say, I don't get this, so what? And we have had that. Tammy and I are, if you're on Facebook and you saw Tammy and I's first article from her dissertation published, and I will tell you that was article number 3. Article number 2 is still in review, and article number 1 got desk rejected from an editor that looked at it, read it, said, this is all really nice, well, fine and dandy. There's nothing publishable here because I don't really care that this hasn't been published before, that there's a gap in the literature, because it doesn't seem relevant to what we're, relevant to anything. So we rolled that into the next paper and went on with there. So she'll get 2 papers out of her dissertation instead of 3. So there's a big gap in her literature that the editor was like, yeah, so what? Which I tell her to put it away and, you know, have a nice stiff drink and, you know, or a drink of coffee if that's what you prefer or whatever, and let it sit for 2 weeks and then go back and look at it, because it's really raw and really hurtful whenever you first read somebody saying that about your baby. It's like somebody walking up and saying, gee, your baby's ugly. You know, that doesn't go over so well, even if it's your puppy dog. If there's not a gap in the literature, so you're finding a lot of stuff on where you think you want to focus, sometimes the way to get around that is to think up a novel twist. If you can't find a piece that is like a perspective that's not captured in the literature, like it's not, you know, there's a lot of work on 2-year colleges, or there's a lot of work on, you know, this type of student, returning students, or changing the perspectives on it. Then sometimes what you could do is focus on, when it comes time for your real dissertation. For my project, I'll be honest, for my project, if there's not a gap, then make me a gap. You know, although this study has been done in all these different contexts, I want to see how it works in my department. Fine. For my project, like I said before, for my project, if you end up teaching chess to your 3 kids and 3 of the neighbors' kids, and that's the study you do for me, and you can collect the data and write on it, fine. You may never use that again. I don't care. You need to do a study for me. I'd like it to connect to your dissertation and the work that you want to do in the future, because that helps you out. But if you just need a way to collect data, because like in the summer, it's really difficult for some reason to collect data. So for you, Susan, I would say do what you want to do that will help your program go forward, because right now you don't have IRB, so you can't publish it anyway. So within your department, if this is going to be helpful, do something that's helpful. If you think it's an area you want to move forward for your dissertation, then you'll be working with your advisor to come up with a unique angle that will allow you to kind of position it and publish it. That was a good question. Anybody else? I will tell you, I really like taking things that are done in other contexts and moving them to a different context. Like I like taking things that are done within a school system and pulling them into an out-of-school program. Or I like things that are like commonly found in museum studies, and you know, how do we drop those into the classroom and make them interesting and make them work? Or we do this all the time with adults. Why don't we do it with kids? Or, yeah, that kind of thing. No other questions? Is it that you're just this good, or is it that you just don't even know what you don't know to ask yet?
I think it's just not knowing what we don't know yet. I would say, for me, it's been a little bit difficult finding literature. I did find a dissertation that's 113 pages long that was almost spot on to what I wanted to study. So it looks like someone else had the same kind of question last year in 2017. So I just don't know how deep to, I mean, I want to take pieces of it, but there's just not a lot in K-12 space. So I'm going to start branching out a little bit more into the higher ed.
K-12 space, specifically your topic that you decided on?
It was to investigate the kind of like why high school or secondary leaders question the quality of online instruction compared to traditional. So what piqued my interest in it was the, remember you guys when we read that one piece, I think it was Mike's class, and it was the Sloan, the Alfred Sloan piece where they kind of dissected K-12 online learning and said it, you know, in 2016, there's going to be like millions of kids taking online classes, and most of the kids, so they surveyed all of these secondary administrators, and the feedback was really the majority of them are doing it for credit recovery. So that to me was really intriguing, because I thought, okay, in working with my colleagues, I know sometimes there's a question of the rigor or the quality of an online course versus a traditional course, but then why do they think that way? So a couple of my questions that I started to draft were just, why are they in that mindset? Why are they thinking that way? What variables or what exposure have they had to make them feel like it's less quality than a traditional or a blended environment?
Okay, so you're looking at teacher perspectives. Okay.
More administrator, more the leaders of the building, because they set the tone with the teachers.
Okay, so by looking at some different keywords, if you've watched, I had views and then I changed it to perspectives. That gave me another set of literature. I had teacher, I had educator, and then I have administration, and each time it has took it to a different set of literature that it's pulling up for it. So I will say that from my background with the cyber schooling, it's either kids that are very, very motivated or kids that are school avoiders. That the rural Western Pennsylvania that I was working in had a lot of students coming up in. So, but it's not answering your question. That's just kind of addressing that one little piece of it. So I'm looking for just one good study. It looks like it would be doing that. Okay. So if we're going to look at this then, and this is, maybe something that we find that you think is going to be beneficial for it. Looking at perspectives of state online learning for special education. Okay, so here are some key terms that they're using. And then if I download it, oops, hold on, clicked on the wrong thing there. When I download it, and now you can't see what I'm doing. I think it's this one. I didn't have my screen shared when I was talking about the key terms, did I? I thought I had my screen shared and I was showing you my Google Scholar and how as I was changing the words and pasting different ones in, it was changing it, but I don't think I actually had shared it. But I was doing it.
Yeah, I saw it. I saw it.
Yeah, I saw it too.
Yeah, it was.
All
right. Okay, so I'm not going crazy. It's just a Monday. All right, so then whenever I look through here, and let's say that, you find one dissertation that's fantastic, all right, but it's not really published, so dissertations are a good starting place to kind of read through, but they're like Wikipedia. Okay, anybody can write one. A couple people will pass it. It's not going to say that it's actually going to make a journal. So I think this article is great. It's fantastic, amazing, really, really short. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to go to the literature that they're pulling from. So then, okay, factors, online outcomes in undergrad here. A survey of district administrators, the Sloan Consortium. That might be really something fantastic for you, even if it's not 2007. Okay, so I'm going to start.
I think that's the actual article. I think it is. Is it? I think it is. The one that I've gone off of. Yeah.
Oh,
so that's good to know that they referenced it. Yep.
Yeah. So then look and see who they cited. So like this one here, keeping 12 pace with K-12. I would look that one up. This one here in the internet, number 9, in the internet and higher education. That kind of thing, like right here, I would pull that article and kind of go down through it. Even though it's 2012 and some of these are really old in comparison, this article is kind of old too, but I would pull these ones and then I would start to build from them. And I would also go to, Okay, so this is, let's say that this is the one we were looking at, and it says cited by 33. These are the ones then that cited this article and that used it. So that can also give you a place to start to bounce off of it. Now this is really starting to focus on like special ed and those kind of things, but there's probably 1 or 2 articles in there that can help. And that's one way you can start to build your lit review if you're not finding anything, is by branching up and branching down. If you really are not finding anything on it, you can always do the Ask a Librarian. Your lovely little fee pays for that service. So make use of the library. I honestly think I request more documents on demand than anybody in my department. Yeah, Science Direct, Web of Science, and there's another educational database that's there that ends up giving you pretty targeted results within it as well. I would rather Google Scholar it than database it, but that's my own personal preference, and that's because I have connection issues sometimes. But the librarians would tell me that I am 100% wrong. So, like Julia Liddell, who's defending this week from the first cohort, she was on my case all the time about not using the databases properly. But the librarians can help you walk through that as well if you ask them about it, to do some searching and to find some better key terms, because they know how things get indexed. So that's a really great resource for you. And I know a couple of you have said issues on finding some words. What I found too was that it can be just the terminology that you're using and how you're putting the words together. So I would take like the words that I used on that Google search. If I were truly searching for this and this was what my end goal was going to be, I would rearrange them to prioritize them differently and put like one first, like maybe administrators first and then online learning and then, you know, views or perspectives or something at the end, and look at how that goes. And I also use quotation marks on different pieces of it at times to get different results. So that helps. If you use Chrome browser, do any of you guys use Chrome browser? Okay, so I'm really bad. I love Firefox, but I'm learning to use Chrome. So if you use Chrome browser, if you don't know about it, it's called OneTab. Do any of you guys know about that? All right, let me find it here. OneTab is really helpful. Here's my Chrome browser. Okay, so with my Chrome browser, if I were to do like a Google Scholar search, which I mean, I have Google Scholar over here somewhere, but it's hiding because I have so many other things that, all right, so then there's another page that's in here. And so maybe I want to look at, okay, so I'm going to look at. Okay, so maybe I'm going to, I want to look at this one. I'm coming down here. Maybe I want to look at this one. I want to look at this one. I'm going to, okay, I'm getting a couple of these open for you. So maybe these are all the ones that I'm interested in. This is the Google add-on. It's called OneTab. So I have all of these open, and I'm afraid to close my my laptop because I'm going to lose them all, but I'm not done looking. Okay, it puts them all right here for me. I can restore them all, delete them all, shows a web page, more. I can name this, lock this, any of these kind of things. And I can also import or export the URLs. So then I can save them all and put them in my email, and also I'll go back to here. If I'm working on this project and it's, you know, for Catherine's class maybe, and I'm in a group with 3 other people, I can share it as a web page. QR code scanner, and I can also just grab the link and it'll bring it back up whenever I share it. So there are benefits to working in Google Chrome because that can save you some time later on if you're researching on something and sharing it out with other people. So that's my tech tip for the day. Because I just think that that's so much easier than having to have an email open and copying and pasting the URL in like 17 times or downloading them all and then trying to mail them. Like that. So I'm trying to use that now. All right. More questions? Okay, so if you need to have another talk, would Thursday night-ish? Okay, let's just put it this way. I have class again tomorrow night. I've got something else going on Wednesday night. Thursday night, I can be on Zoom for an hour or so if anybody wants to drop in and say hello and ask some questions once you've gotten a little time. Or you can wait till next Monday and ask me and turn your stuff in a little bit late if you need to. Or shoot me emails during the week as you're working on it. I do tend to get back on emails pretty good. If I don't get back to you in about a week or about a day on an email, then it didn't end up in my inbox where I can see it. So, any other questions? Okay, so like we said last week,